The New York night pressed against the glass walls of the corner office. Inside, everything was still. Elena set the envelope down between them. She didn't sit. She didn't explain. Philip stared at the papers like they were written in a language he no longer controlled. 30 days, she said quietly. Then you won't get to decide anything about me again. But how did they get here? How does a love story that once felt like fate turn into signed papers and 30-day countdowns? To understand that, you need to go back 7 years, back to when Philip's world was nothing but marble floors, quarterly reports, and a penthouse overlooking 8 million people he'd never met. At 51, Philip had built an empire, CEO of one of Manhattan's most profitable investment firms. Corner office, private driver, suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But here's the thing about empires. They're cold and lonely. Every night, he'd stand at that same glass wall, staring down at the city lights, feeling absolutely nothing. Success, it turned out, was a poor substitute for connection. He'd convinced himself he didn't need anyone, that he'd figured out the formula for a complete life. Just him, his work, and the quiet hum of wealth. He'd even made sure of it, permanently. At 28, in a decision he thought was rational and final, Philip had gotten a vasectomy. No children, no complications, no emotional entanglements that could derail the master plan. Back then, it felt like control, like clarity, but that was before Coney Island, before the yellow sundress, before Elena. It was a charity carnival on a sweltering summer afternoon, and Philip had no business being there. Overdressed in a suit, holding a coffee he didn't even want, surrounded by families and laughter and chaos he couldn't relate to. That's when he saw her, or rather, that's when he ruined her outfit. The coffee went everywhere, all over the bright yellow sundress of the most radiant woman he'd ever seen. Philip stammered, grabbed napkins, apologized like a man who'd just committed a felony. But Elena, she laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one. The kind that made her eyes crinkle at the corners and made Philip forget, just for a second, how to breathe. It's okay, she said, brushing it off like it was nothing. Happens. And maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was something deeper. But Philip found himself at a ring toss booth, determined to win her something, anything, to make up for it. And somehow, miraculously, he did. A ridiculous oversized plush bear that made Elena beam like he'd handed her the world. They spent the rest of the afternoon wandering under carnival lights, talking like old friends who'd somehow lost touch and just found each other again. She told him about her work at a non-profit in Brooklyn, about her family's Sunday dinners, about the community arts center she dreamed of opening one day. And Philip, for the first time in years, he listened, really listened, not to close a deal or manage a meeting, but because he wanted to. By sunset, something had shifted in him, something he didn't have a name for yet. They were an unlikely pair. She was 32, vibrant, deeply rooted in a world of potlucks and church choirs and Friday nights filled with people who loved her. He was 58, reserved, a man whose idea of community was a conference call. But somehow it worked. Within a year, he proposed, and she said yes. The wedding was everything, a beautiful collision of two worlds. Her family's warmth, his quiet elegance, music and laughter, and a love that felt for a moment like it could overcome anything. But Philip carried something into that marriage, a secret, the vasectomy, the choice he'd made 3 decades ago when he thought he knew exactly who he was and what he wanted. He told himself he'd bring it up, eventually, when the time was right. But the time never felt right. And then days became months. Months became years. And the silence became easier than the truth. At first, it didn't matter. They were happy, traveling, building dreams. Philip funded Elena's community arts center, and watching her passion come to life filled a part of him he didn't know was empty. But then, slowly, Elena started talking about children. Casual at first, a passing comment when they saw a baby on the street, a wistful smile when one of her friends announced a pregnancy. "Have you thought about us, maybe having a baby?" she asked one night, curled up beside him on the couch. and Philip felt his chest tighten. "We have time, don't we?" he said, kissing her forehead. "Let's not rush." She nodded, believed him, waited. So Elena stopped taking her birth control, and Philip said nothing. Month after month, she bought pregnancy tests. Month after month, they came back negative. And month after month, Philip watched her hope turn into confusion, then worry, then quiet devastation. "Maybe we should see a doctor," she finally said, her voice small and afraid. He agreed. What else could he do? But when her tests came back perfect, healthy, fertile, no issues at all, the walls started closing in. "They want you to get tested next," she told him. And that's when Philip started making excuses. Too busy at work. He'd schedule it next week. Next month. He'd get to it. But he never did. Because he couldn't. Because the moment a doctor confirmed what he already knew, the truth would come out. And the truth, he believed, would destroy everything. The warmth between them began to fade. Philip stayed late at the office, not because he had to, but because going home meant facing her sadness. Elena stopped smiling as much, stopped singing in the kitchen. Some nights he'd find her sitting alone at the dinner table, staring at cold food, lost in a pain he'd caused but refused to name. And, the worst part, she blamed herself. "Maybe I'm doing something wrong," she whispered once, tears streaming down her face. And Philip said nothing, because saying something meant admitting the truth, and he was too much of a coward for that. Then came Thanksgiving, Elena's mother's house. The warmth of family, the smell of roasted turkey, the laughter of people who loved each other without conditions. And then her aunt raised a glass. "So, when are we going to celebrate a baby from you two?" The room went silent. Elena's face flushed. Philip went pale, and without a word, he stood up and walked out. Elena found him on the porch, gripping the railing, staring into the dark. "Please talk to me," she begged, her voice breaking. "If you don't want a child, just say so. This silence, I can't take it." He couldn't even look at her. "It's not that simple. Then why won't you let me in?" she cried. "Why won't you trust me?" And in that moment, Philip realized he was losing her. Not slowly, not eventually, right now. They left early, drove back to Manhattan in crushing silence. And when they got home, Elena went to the drawer, pulled out the divorce papers she'd been hiding. Her hands trembled as she held them out. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "I won't live in a home full of secrets." Philip's world shattered. "Please," he begged, tears finally breaking free. "Give me one night, just one. I'll tell you everything, I promise." She stared at him, at the man she'd loved so deeply, at the stranger he'd become. And finally, she nodded. "Okay." One night, the clock struck midnight, and Philip knew this was his last chance to tell the truth, or lose her forever. But here's the question. When you've built a marriage on silence, can the truth actually save it? Or does it just reveal how broken things have been all along? The living room felt different at midnight. Shadows stretched longer. The city sounds below faded into something distant and surreal. Elena sat on the edge of the sofa, her body rigid, arms wrapped around a cushion like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Philip stood by the window, that same window where he'd spent countless nights avoiding this exact moment. The divorce papers sat on the coffee table between them. A barrier, a countdown, a promise that in 30 days, none of this would matter anymore, unless he found the courage to speak. But here's what nobody tells you about the truth. It doesn't just set you free. Sometimes it burns everything down first. Philip turned slowly, his face pale in the dim lamplight. He looked older than 58 in that moment. Looked like a man who'd been carrying a weight so heavy it had bent him into something unrecognizable. "Elena," he started, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need you to understand something before I say what I'm about to say." She didn't respond, just stared at him with those deep brown eyes that had once looked at him with such love and now held only exhaustion and grief. "I never meant to hurt you," he continued, each word seeming to cost him something. I convinced myself that if I stayed quiet, I could protect you. protect us. But I see now that I was only protecting myself, from your anger, from your disappointment, from losing you." He paused, swallowing hard. "And in doing that, I hurt you worse than any truth ever could have." Elena's grip tightened on the cushion. "What are you saying, Philip?" Her voice was steady but barely. "What truth have you been hiding from me?" And there it was, the moment, the cliff edge, the point of no return. Philip moved away from the window, took a few steps toward her, then stopped, as if some invisible force field prevented him from getting too close. "When I was 28 years old," he began, his gaze dropping to the floor because looking at her was impossible, "I made a decision. I was young, ambitious, completely consumed by building my career. I had this vision of what my life would be, and in that vision, there was no room for a family, no room for children, no complications." Elena's brow furrowed. She leaned forward slightly, trying to understand where this was going. What kind of decision? Philip's jaw clenched. His hands balled into fists at his sides. And then he said it. The words that would change everything. "I had a vasectomy, Elena. I made myself unable to have children. 30 years ago, the silence that followed wasn't really silence at all. It was the sound of a world collapsing." Elena heard it. The crashing, the splintering, the shattering of every assumption she'd built her life on. She stared at him, her lips parted, her eyes wide with incomprehension. "You... what?" The word came out strangled, barely human. "A vasectomy," Philip repeated, and saying it again somehow made it more real, more devastating. "Before I ever met you, before I knew you existed, before I understood what love even was." Elena stood abruptly, the cushion falling to the floor. She took a step back as if his words had physical weight, as if they could crush her if she stood too close. You can't have children." Her voice rose slightly, panic creeping in at the edges. "You've never been able to." Philip nodded, tears now streaming freely down his face. "Not since I was 28. And then Elena understood. All of it. In one horrible clarifying moment, the entire puzzle assembled itself in her mind. The negative pregnancy tests month after month. The doctor told her she was perfectly healthy, perfectly fertile. Philip's strange reluctance to get tested himself. His excuses. His distance. His silence. "Oh my God," she breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, you knew. This whole time, you knew." Her legs seemed to give out, and she sank back onto the sofa, but this time she was shaking. "Every test I took, every time I cried, every time I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered what was wrong with me." Her voice broke. "You knew it wasn't me. You knew the whole time." Philip moved toward her instinctively, but she held up a hand, stopping him cold. "Don't," she said sharply. "Don't come near me right now." He froze, his arms half extended, helpless. "Elena, please." "How long?" she demanded, her eyes blazing now with something beyond hurt. Something closer to rage. "How long have you been lying to me?" "I never lied." "Don't." The word exploded out of her, louder than she'd intended, echoing off the walls of their too-quiet penthouse. "Don't you dare tell me you didn't lie. You let me believe we were trying for a baby when you knew it was impossible. You watched me take those tests. You held me while I cried. You told me it would happen when it was meant to." Tears were pouring down her face now. "What do you call that, if not lying?" Philip's shoulders sagged. "You're right," he whispered. "You're absolutely right. I lied by omission. I lied in silence. I lied every single day for years. Why?" Elena's voice cracked on the word, all the anger draining out of it, leaving only raw, aching confusion. "Why would you do that to me? Why would you let me torture myself?" And this, Philip knew, was the real question, the one that mattered more than any other. He moved slowly to a chair across from her, not too close, respecting her space, but close enough that she could see his face, see the truth in his eyes even if she couldn't stand to hear it in his words. "Because I was terrified," he admitted, his voice hollow. "When I met you at that carnival, something in me changed, fundamentally changed. For the first time in my life, I wanted something more than success, more than money, more than the empire I'd built. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I wanted you. I wanted a life with you. And the more I fell in love with you, the more I realized what I'd done to myself all those years ago, what I'd stolen from my own future. Elena listened, her face a mask of pain, but she didn't interrupt. Couldn't, because part of her needed to understand, even if understanding didn't equal forgiving. I told myself I'd bring it up, Philip continued, before we got serious, before we got engaged, before the wedding. I had 1,000 opportunities, and I chickened out every single time. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, looking more broken than she'd ever seen him. Because I knew what would happen if I told you. You'd leave. Of course you would. Why would a woman who wanted children stay with a man who couldn't give them to her? So you just decided for me? Elena's voice was quiet now, dangerously quiet. You just took away my choice. Yes, the admission was stark, undefended. That's exactly what I did, and I have no excuse for it except cowardice. Elena stood again, needing to move, needing to put distance between herself and the man who suddenly felt like a stranger. She walked to the window, to the very spot where Philip had stood moments before, and stared out at the glittering city. Do you have any idea, she said slowly, carefully, as if each word might shatter her if she wasn't careful, what it's like to feel like your body is broken, to lie, awake at night, wondering what's wrong with you, to see your friends announce pregnancies on social media and feel this hollow jealousy mixed with self-hatred? Philip opened his mouth, but she kept going, her voice gaining strength. I started avoiding baby showers, Philip. I stopped going to family gatherings because I couldn't stand the questions, the pitying looks, the helpful suggestions about fertility diets and acupuncture and prayer circles. My own mother pulled me aside one day and asked if maybe I was too stressed, if maybe I needed to relax more, as if it was my fault. She spun to face him. And you let me believe it. You watched me sink into that darkness, and you said nothing. I know, Philip said, his voice breaking. I watched you disappear a little more each day, and I hated myself for it. But I didn't know how to tell you. The longer I waited, the worse it got, and the more impossible it became to find the right words. There were no right words. Elena shouted. There was only the truth, and you didn't have the courage to speak it. The accusation hung in the air between them, undeniable and devastating, because she was right. There was no gentle way to confess something like this, no perfect moment, only the truth, raw and painful and necessary. Did you ever plan to tell me? Elena asked after a long moment, her voice trembling. Or were you just going to let me believe it was my fault forever? Philip stood slowly, his whole body seeming to ache with the weight of what he'd done. I thought about getting it reversed, he admitted. I researched it, found specialists, read about the procedures, the success rates, the risks. I even made an appointment once. Elena's eyes widened slightly. You did? I cancelled it the day before. He laughed bitterly. Because I was afraid. Afraid the reversal wouldn't work, and then I'd have to explain why I needed it in the first place. Afraid of getting your hopes up only to crush them. Afraid, afraid, afraid. That's all I've been for years, Elena. Just a coward in an expensive suit. She studied him, this man she'd married, this man she'd built a life with, this man who now seemed like someone she'd never truly known. When I said I wanted children, she said quietly, what did you think would happen? Did you think I'd just forget about it? That I'd never notice we couldn't conceive? I don't know what I thought, Philip admitted helplessly. Maybe that we'd be so happy in other ways it wouldn't matter as much. Maybe that you'd decide on your own, you didn't want kids after all. Maybe I just didn't let myself think about it because thinking about it meant facing what I'd done. Elena shook her head slowly, as if trying to shake off the weight of his words. That's the thing, Philip. You didn't just lie to me. You lied to yourself. You convinced yourself that love would be enough, that if you just loved me hard enough, the truth wouldn't matter. She walked toward him now, closing the distance, her eyes searching his face. But love without honesty isn't love. It's just a beautiful cage. Do you understand what you've taken from me? Elena's voice was steady now, but there was steel in it. Cold, hard steel. It's not just about the children, Philip. It's about trust. It's about partnership. It's about the fundamental right to make informed decisions about my own life. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the tears on his face, the genuine agony in his eyes. And part of her wanted to comfort him, to reach out and hold him the way she'd done 1,000 times before. But another part, a stronger part, knew that this moment wasn't about his pain. It was about hers. When I was 25 and you were 51, she said, there was already a power imbalance between us. Age, money, experience, position. I knew that going in, but I trusted you, Philip. I trusted that despite all those differences, we were equals in the ways that mattered, that you saw me as a partner, that you respected me enough to be honest with me. Her voice caught. But you didn't. You treated me like a child who needed to be protected from difficult truths, like I wasn't strong enough or smart enough or adult enough to handle reality. Philip's face crumpled. No, Elena, that's not. Then what was it? She challenged. If it wasn't that you thought I couldn't handle the truth, then what? Did you think I didn't deserve it? Did you think our marriage vows didn't include honesty? I thought I'd lose you. The words burst out of him, desperate and raw. I thought if I told you, you'd walk away, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing you. So I kept quiet. And I told myself it was because I loved you, but really it was because I was selfish, because I wanted you more than I wanted to do the right thing. Elena's expression shifted then, from anger to something deeper, something that looked almost like grief. I'm 32 years old, she said softly. 32. And I've spent almost 7 years of my life, some of the most fertile, viable years I have, in a marriage with a man who knew from day one that we could never have children together. The implications of this settled over them like a shroud. 7 years. 7 years she could have spent with someone else. 7 years she could have spent making different choices, building a different life. I could have. Elena started, then stopped, her throat closing around the words. I could have had children by now, Philip, if I'd known, if you'd been honest with me from the start. I could have made different choices. I know, Philip whispered, and the guilt in those 2 words was palpable. Do you? Elena pressed. Do you really understand what you've taken from me? It's not hypothetical, Philip. It's not abstract. It's been years. It's time I can never get back. It's a choice I can never remake. She turned away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. And the worst part is that I love you. Even now, even after everything, I still love you. And I hate myself for it. Philip moved toward her instinctively, his hand reaching out to touch her shoulder, but stopping just short. Don't hate yourself, he said hoarsely. Please, hate me, rage at me, despise me, but don't turn this inward. You've done nothing wrong. Nothing. This is all on me. Elena looked back at him over her shoulder, her eyes red and swollen. How am I supposed to trust you ever again? She asked, and it wasn't rhetorical. It was genuine. A real question that demanded a real answer. How am I supposed to believe anything you say after this? How do I know there aren't other secrets? Other lies you're keeping because you think you're protecting me? Philip felt the question like a physical blow. Because she was right to ask it, right to doubt him. He'd destroyed the foundation of their marriage, and foundations, once cracked, don't just magically repair themselves. I don't know how to prove it to you, he said honestly. I don't know how to earn back your trust, except to give you time, and transparency, and to never, ever hide anything from you again. He stepped around to face her, keeping his hands at his sides even though every instinct screamed to hold her. But I swear to you, Elena, on everything I have and everything I am, there are no other secrets. This is it. This is the thing I've been hiding, and I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you that I understand what I've done and that I will never do it again. Elena searched his face, looking for, what? Sincerity? Remorse? Some sign that he was capable of change? She found all of those things, but she also found something else, fear. Philip was terrified. genuinely, deeply terrified that this was the end, that he'd lost her. And somehow, that fear was the first thing that felt real and honest in years. "I need to know why," Elena said finally. "Why did you get the vasectomy in the first place? Because that decision, that wasn't about me, that was about you. And I need to understand who you were back then, to understand who you are now." Philip nodded slowly and gestured to the sofa. "Can we sit?" Elena hesitated, then moved to the far end of the couch, putting as much distance between them as possible. Philip took the other end, his body angled toward her, but not encroaching. "When I was 28, he began, "I'd just made my first million. I was working 100-hour weeks, living on ambition and coffee and very little else. I'd come from nothing, you know that. My father was a factory worker who died of a heart attack at 46. My mother cleaned houses until her knees gave out. I grew up watching them work themselves into early graves for a family that gave them nothing but burden and obligation." Elena listened, her expression unreadable. She'd heard pieces of this story before, but never in this context. Never as an explanation for the choice that had altered both their lives. "I swore I'd never live like that," Philip continued. "I swore I'd never be trapped by circumstances, and in my young, arrogant mind, family was a trap. Children were anchors that would drag me down, keep me from achieving everything I wanted to achieve. So I made a choice, a permanent choice, to ensure I'd never be my father, never be tied down, never be vulnerable in that way." "You were young," Elena acknowledged quietly. "People make all kinds of decisions when they're young. But I didn't change my mind," Philip said, his voice heavy. "For 23 years, I didn't change my mind. I built my empire. I lived alone in that penthouse. I convinced myself I was happy. And I was, in a shallow, empty sort of way." He looked at her directly now. "And then I met you. And suddenly, every assumption I'd ever made about my life felt wrong. You made me want things I'd trained myself not to want. A home, not just a house. Connection, not just transactions. A future that looked like more than just profit margins and quarterly reports. But you didn't tell me," Elena said, and there was less anger in it now and more exhaustion. "Even when you realized you'd changed, you still didn't tell me. Because by then, I was in too deep," Philip admitted. "We were dating, then engaged, then married, and every step of the way I knew I should tell you, but I also knew what the result would be. You'd leave. Any rational person would leave. So I just kept going. Kept hoping that somehow it would work out, that maybe the issue would never come up, or that medicine would advance enough that reversal would become easier, or that—" He stopped, shaking his head. "I was grasping at straws, making excuses, being a coward." Elena was quiet for a long time, processing everything he'd said. Then, softly, "I blamed my body." The words were simple, but the pain in them was immeasurable. "Every month when the test was negative, I looked at myself and thought, what's wrong with me? Why am I broken?" She looked up at him with eyes so full of hurt it was almost unbearable to witness. "I started researching fertility treatments in secret. I took vitamins. I tracked my cycle obsessively. I changed my diet. I prayed." Her voice broke. "I prayed, Philip. I prayed to God to fix whatever was wrong with me so I could give you a child." Philip felt something inside him shatter at those words. "Elena, I cried myself to sleep so many nights," she continued, as if she couldn't stop now that she'd started. "I felt like less of a woman, less of a wife. I started avoiding my friends who were pregnant because seeing them hurt too much. My own cousin announced she was expecting, and I locked myself in the bathroom at the family party and sobbed because I was so jealous. And so ashamed of being jealous and so confused about why my body wouldn't cooperate." The tears were flowing freely now, and this time when Philip moved closer, she didn't stop him. "And you knew," she whispered. "The whole time, you knew it wasn't me, and you let me believe it was. How could you do that to someone you claim to love?" "Because I'm weak," Philip said, his own tears matching hers. "Because I'm selfish. Because I was more afraid of losing you than I was concerned about your pain, and there is no excuse for that. None." They sat in silence for a while, both crying, both processing the enormity of what had been revealed and what it meant for them going forward. The clock on the mantel ticked relentlessly, marking seconds that felt simultaneously endless and too fast. Finally, Elena spoke. "What do you want, Philip?" Her voice was exhausted, defeated. "Do you want me to stay? Do you want to fix this? Or are you just confessing so you can feel better about yourself when I leave?" Philip looked at her, really looked at her, and made a choice. The choice he should have made 7 years ago. To be completely, vulnerably, terrifyingly honest. "I want you to stay," he said, his voice steady despite the tears. "I want to spend every day for the rest of my life earning back your trust. I want to go to couples therapy. I want to look into reversal options or adoption or whatever path might give you the family you deserve. I want to be the man you thought you married." He paused. "But more than any of that, I want you to be happy, even if that happiness doesn't include me, even if it means watching you walk out that door and build a life with someone else. Because that's what love actually is, Elena. Not holding on because you're afraid, not keeping secrets to maintain an illusion, but wanting the other person's well-being more than your own comfort." Elena stared at him, trying to reconcile this man, raw and honest and broken, with the one who'd lied to her for years. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said finally. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if what we had can be salvaged." "I know," Philip acknowledged. "Then why tell me now?" she asked. "Why not just let me walk away believing it was nobody's fault? Why make it harder?" Philip's answer was simple and devastating. "Because you deserve the truth, even if it costs me everything, even if it means you hate me. You deserve to know that none of this was your fault, that you are not broken, that you are not less than, that the problem was always only me." Elena stood slowly, her legs shaky, and walked to the coffee table where the divorce papers still lay. She picked them up, holding them between trembling fingers. Philip watched, his heart in his throat, preparing himself for the end. She looked at the papers, her signature already there, dark and final. Then she looked at Philip, then back at the papers. "I'm so angry with you," she said quietly. "I'm angrier than I've ever been at anyone in my entire life." "I know," Philip whispered. "And I'm hurt," she continued. "Hurt in ways I didn't know were possible." "I know, but I don't want to walk away without trying," she said, and Philip's breath caught. "I don't want to be the person who gives up when things get hard. I don't want to look back and wonder if we could have fixed this if I'd just been willing to try." Slowly, deliberately, Elena tore the divorce papers in half. The sound was sharp and final in the quiet room. "I'm not promising forgiveness," she said firmly, letting the torn pieces fall to the coffee table. "I'm not promising everything will go back to how it was, but I'm promising to try, to see if there's anything left to save." Philip stood, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "Elena." "Don't," she said, holding up a hand. "Don't thank me. Don't apologize again. Just promise me that from this moment forward, there are no more secrets, no more lies, no more protecting me from difficult truths. We face everything together honestly, or we don't face it at all." "I promise," Philip said, his voice fervent. "I swear to you, no more secrets, ever." Elena nodded, then walked toward him slowly. When she reached him, she didn't embrace him. Instead, she placed one hand on his chest, over his heart. "This is your last chance," she said, softly, looking up into his eyes. "If you lie to me again, if you hide anything from me again, I'm gone. No second chances, no explanations, just gone. Do you understand?" "I understand," Philip said, covering her hand with his own. "And I won't waste it. I swear I won't waste it." They stood like that for a long moment, not quite embracing, not quite separate. Two people on the edge of either a new beginning or a prolonged ending. "I think I need to sleep in the guest room tonight," Elena said finally. "I need space to process all of this." Philip nodded, even though the thought of her sleeping in another room felt like a small death. "Of course, whatever you need." She started to turn away, then stopped. "Philip?" "Yes?" "Thank you for finally telling me the truth," she said quietly, "even if it came years too late, even if it broke my heart." Thank you for finally being honest." And with that, she walked down the hall to the guest bedroom and closed the door softly behind her. Philip stood alone in the living room, surrounded by the ruins of the life he'd built on lies, and felt something unexpected: hope. Because she'd torn up the papers. Because she'd said she wanted to try. Because for the first time in 7 years, there were no more secrets between them. Just truth. Painful, devastating, liberating truth. He looked at the torn divorce papers on the coffee table, then at the closed door of the guest room, and made himself a promise. He would spend every day proving he was worth the second chance she'd given him. No matter how long it took, no matter how hard it got, he would become the man she deserved. The next morning came too quickly, and not quickly enough. Philip had spent the night on the sofa, unable to bring himself to sleep in their bed without Elena there. He'd lain awake, replaying every moment of their conversation, feeling the weight of years of deception finally lifted, even as he grappled with the damage those years had done. When Elena emerged from the guest room, she looked exhausted, eyes red, face drawn. She'd clearly slept as poorly as he had. "Coffee?" Philip offered quietly. She nodded, and they moved through the morning routine in careful, uncomfortable silence. Not the comfortable silence of old familiarity, but the weighted silence of two people learning how to be around each other again. "I think we should see a therapist," Elena said as they sat at the kitchen island with their coffee. "A couples therapist. Someone who can help us navigate this." "Yes," Philip agreed immediately. "Whatever you think will help. I'll find someone today." Elena looked at him over the rim of her mug. "And I think you should look into therapy for yourself too. Because the kind of fear that makes you lie for years, that's something you need to work through." Again, Philip nodded. "You're right. I will." "I'm serious, Philip," Elena pressed. "This isn't about me asking you to change. This is about you needing to figure out why you made the choices you made. Otherwise, we're just putting a band-aid on something that needs surgery." "I understand," Philip said, and he meant it. For the first time, he was seeing clearly how deep his issues ran. "I'll call someone today. I'll do whatever it takes." They sat in silence for another moment, sipping their coffee, both aware that this was just the beginning of a very long, very difficult journey. "I'm scared," Elena admitted softly. Philip looked at her. "Of what?" "That I won't be able to forgive you," she said honestly. "That I'll try and the hurt will just be too deep. That we'll spend months or years in therapy and it still won't be enough." She set down her mug. "And I'm scared that even if I do forgive you, I'll never be able to trust you completely again. That I'll always be waiting for the next secret to come out." Philip's chest tightened. "Those are valid fears," he said carefully. "And I can't promise you that forgiveness will come easily, or that trust will rebuild quickly. All I can promise is that I will do everything in my power to show you, every single day, that I'm worth trusting again." "What if it's not enough?" Elena asked, and there were tears in her eyes. "What if we try and it just doesn't work?" "Then we'll know we tried," Philip said gently. "And you'll be able to walk away with no regrets, knowing you gave us every possible chance." He reached across the counter, stopping just short of touching her hand. "But I have to believe it will be enough, Elena. I have to believe that love, combined with honesty and effort and time, can heal even the deepest wounds. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" Elena looked at his hand, hovering near hers, and after a moment's hesitation, she closed the distance. Her fingers intertwined with his, tentatively, carefully, but deliberately. "Okay," she whispered. "We try. But Philip, I need you to understand something. Anything. This doesn't mean I'm okay," she said firmly. "This doesn't mean I forgive you or that things are back to normal. This means I'm willing to do the work to see if we can get to okay. But it's going to take time, a lot of time. And there will be days when I'm angry and days when I can't stand to look at you and days when I question whether this is worth it." Philip nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "I understand. And I'll be here for all of those days. The angry ones and the sad ones and the ones where you're not sure. I'll be here, doing the work, proving myself, for as long as it takes." They sat like that for a while, hands linked across the kitchen island, both knowing that the real work was just beginning. That confession was only the first step. That rebuilding trust was a marathon, not a sprint. But they were in it together now. No more secrets, no more silence. Just the hard, messy, terrifying work of two people trying to save a marriage that had nearly been destroyed by lies. As the morning light streamed through the windows of their Manhattan penthouse, Elena looked at the man she'd married, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time. Not as the perfect, confident CEO she'd fallen for at that carnival. Not as the lying, cowardly husband who'd hidden the truth for years. But as a flawed, frightened, deeply remorseful human being who had made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences of those choices with as much courage as he could muster. It wasn't enough to fix everything. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was something. It was a start. And as Elena sat there, holding the hand of the man who had broken her heart, she found herself asking a question she hadn't expected to ask. What does it mean to forgive someone who's hurt you this deeply? Is forgiveness about erasing the past, or is it about choosing to move forward despite the past? Can you rebuild a foundation that's been shattered, or do you have to build something entirely new? And if you choose to stay, to try, to fight for a love that's been tainted by lies, does that make you strong, or does it make you foolish? These were the questions Elena would carry with her into the uncertain future that stretched ahead. Questions without easy answers. Questions that would take time, therapy, tears, and tremendous effort to even begin to address. But as she sat there in the morning light, holding Philip's hand, she realized something profound. She was willing to find out. The truth had finally been spoken. The secret had finally been revealed. And now, in the aftermath of that devastating honesty, they would discover whether their love was strong enough to survive it, whether forgiveness was possible, whether trust could be rebuilt, whether a marriage fractured by lies could be made whole again by truth. The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be setbacks and painful conversations and moments of doubt. But they were facing it together now, with open eyes and honest hearts. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. So the question became this: can a marriage survive brutal honesty after years of comfortable lies? Elena and Philip were about to find out, because confession, as it turns out, is just the beginning. The real test comes in the days and weeks and months that follow, when the adrenaline of revelation fades and you're left with the hard, unglamorous work of rebuilding something that's been shattered into 1,000 pieces. And rebuilding requires more than words. It requires action, consistency, patience, and a willingness to sit in discomfort until comfort can be earned again. The morning after the confession, Philip made 3 phone calls. The first was to his office, telling them he'd be taking a leave of absence, something he'd never done in 30 years. The second was to a highly recommended marriage counselor, securing an appointment for that same week. The third was to a therapist who specialized in helping people understand their own patterns of avoidance and fear. Elena watched him make these calls from across the room, her arms wrapped around herself, still processing everything that had been said in the dark hours of the night before. This was new territory for both of them. Philip taking action instead of hiding, Elena observing instead of immediately trusting. When he hung up from the last call, he looked at her with uncertainty. "I know actions speak louder than words," he said quietly. "So, I'm starting with actions." Elena nodded slowly, not quite ready to praise him, but acknowledging the effort. "Good," she said simply. And that became their new normal for a while. Small acknowledgements instead of grand gestures. Careful words instead of easy affection. They were learning each other again, but this time with all the cards on the table. That first week was strange. They moved around the penthouse like polite strangers, navigating shared spaces with exaggerated courtesy. "Do you need the bathroom?" "I'm making tea. Would you like some?" "I'm heading out. Do you need anything?" Every interaction was measured, careful, as if they were both afraid that one wrong word might shatter the fragile truce they'd established. Their first session with Dr. Monica Chen happened on a Thursday afternoon in a cozy office in the West Village that smelled like lavender and old books. Elena sat on one end of a comfortable grey sofa, Philip on the other, a careful distance between them. Dr. Chen, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an air of no-nonsense compassion, observed them both before speaking. "So," she began, Tell me why you're here." It was Philip who spoke first. "Because I lied to my wife for 7 years and nearly destroyed our marriage. And I need help making sure I never do anything like that again." His directness surprised Elena. No softening, no excuses, just the raw truth. Dr. Chen turned to Elena. "And you? Why are you here?" Elena took a breath. "Because I still love him. Despite everything, I still love him. But I don't know if love is enough. And I need help figuring out if what we have can be saved, or if I'm just delaying the inevitable." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Those are both honest answers. And honesty, I suspect, is something you two are learning how to do." Over the course of that first session, they unpacked the basics, the vasectomy, the years of silence, the pain of Elena's self-blame, Philip's fear-driven deception. Dr. Chen listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions, letting them both speak their truths. Near the end of the hour, she looked at them both seriously. "Here's what I'm going to tell you," she said. "This is fixable, but it's not going to be easy. Philip, you broke something fundamental, trust. And trust, once broken, takes years to rebuild, not weeks, not months. Years. Are you prepared for that?" Philip didn't hesitate. "Yes." "And Elena," Dr. Chen continued, "you're going to have to decide whether you want to do the work of forgiving him. Not today, not next week, but eventually. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means choosing not to let this define your entire relationship forever. Are you prepared for that work?" Elena hesitated longer before answering. "I think so. I want to be—" "Then we have a starting point," Dr. Chen said, "and that's all we need right now. But wanting to forgive and actually forgiving are two very different things." In the weeks that followed, Elena discovered just how deep her anger ran. There were days when she'd look at Philip across the breakfast table and feel a wave of rage so intense it took her breath away. Days when she'd remember another negative pregnancy test, another night of crying herself to sleep, another moment of self-doubt, and she'd have to leave the room before she said something she couldn't take back. Philip learned to read these moments, learned to give her space without asking questions, learned that sometimes the most loving thing he could do was simply leave her alone. One evening, about a month after the confession, Elena was in the kitchen when she knocked over a glass. It shattered on the tile floor, and she just stood there, staring at the broken pieces, tears suddenly streaming down her face. Philip came running at the sound, found her standing motionless among the shards. "Elena, I can't even break a glass without falling apart," she said through her tears, her voice breaking with frustration and exhaustion. "I'm so tired, Philip. I'm so tired of being angry and hurt and sad. I just want to feel normal again." Philip grabbed a towel and carefully swept the glass aside, then guided her away from it. "You don't have to feel normal," he said gently. "You just have to feel what you're feeling, even if that's angry and hurt and sad. But I don't want to feel this way forever." Elena sobbed, and Philip pulled her into his arms, the first real embrace they'd shared since that night. "You won't," he promised, holding her as she cried. "I swear to you, you won't. But you have to let yourself feel it first." And so she did. She let herself feel all of it, the anger, the grief, the betrayal, the loss of years she couldn't get back. And Philip held her through it, offering no platitudes, no false promises, just presence. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started with small moments. Philip brought Elena coffee in bed one Saturday morning, made exactly the way she liked it. She accepted it with a small smile, not quite forgiving, but softening. Elena made his favorite dinner one evening without being asked. He thanked her with genuine gratitude in his eyes, and they ate together without the heavy silence that had characterized their earlier meals. They started taking walks in Central Park on Sunday mornings, something they used to do when they first got married. At first, these walks were quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. But gradually they began talking again. Really talking. About small things at first. A book Elena was reading. A documentary Philip had watched. The changing seasons in the city they both loved. Then, one day, Elena asked him about his childhood. Not the sanitized version he'd told her when they were dating, but the real story, the poverty, the struggle, the fear that had shaped him. And Philip told her about his father's death, and his mother's exhaustion, and his own desperate determination to escape. Told her about the loneliness of success, and the way he'd convinced himself that isolation was strength. "I think I've been afraid my whole life," he admitted, as they sat on a bench overlooking the lake. "Afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of needing people, afraid that if I let anyone too close, they'd see how scared I actually was, and leave." Elena listened, and for the first time since the confession, she felt something other than anger. She felt compassion. Not excusing, not minimizing, but understanding. "Fear makes us do terrible things," she said quietly. "But it doesn't have to define us forever." Philip looked at her, hope flickering in his eyes. "Do you really believe that?" "I'm trying to," Elena said honestly. "I'm really trying." The real breakthrough came 3 months after the confession, during a particularly intense therapy session. Dr. Chen had asked Elena to tell Philip exactly what she needed from him. Going forward, not in general terms, but specifically. Elena took a breath and looked directly at her husband. "I need you to stop being afraid of me," she said. "I need you to trust that I'm strong enough to handle difficult truths. I need you to come to me when you're scared or uncertain instead of hiding it. I need you to treat me like an equal partner, not someone who needs to be protected from reality." Philip nodded, listening intently. "And I need you to understand," Elena continued, her voice gaining strength, "that I'm choosing to stay not because I'm weak or because I don't have other options. I'm staying because I believe in us, in what we could be if we're both willing to be honest and vulnerable. But that means you have to be willing to be honest and vulnerable too." "I am," Philip said firmly. "I will be. I promise you, Elena, I will never hide from you again." Dr. Chen leaned forward. "Philip, do you understand what Elena is really asking you for?" Philip thought for a moment. "She's asking me to trust her, the way I should have trusted her from the beginning." "Exactly," Dr. Chen confirmed. "She's asking you to trust that your relationship is strong enough to handle the truth, that she is strong enough to handle the truth. And that's terrifying for someone who's spent his whole life believing that vulnerability equals weakness. But it's also the only way forward." Philip turned to Elena, and when he spoke, his voice was raw with emotion. "You are the strongest person I've ever known," he said. "And I'm sorry it took me so long to trust that strength. I'm sorry I underestimated you. I'm sorry I thought my fear was more important than your right to know the truth." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for finally seeing me." But there was still one massive question they hadn't fully addressed. What about children? One evening, about 4 months into their rebuilding process, Elena brought it up. They were cooking dinner together, something that had become their ritual, a way to spend time together while keeping their hands busy. "I've been thinking," Elena said carefully as she chopped vegetables, "about what we want our future to look like, about whether children are still something I need, or whether they were just part of a picture I had in my head." Philip looked up from the pasta he was stirring. And I don't know," Elena admitted. "Part of me still aches for a baby, still sees pregnant women on the street and feels that pang. But another part of me wonders if what I really wanted was just to build something meaningful with you, to create a family, however that looks." Philip set down his spoon and turned to face her fully. "I've been researching vasectomy reversals," he said. "The success rates aren't great, especially after 30 years, but they're not zero either. If you want to try, I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes." Elena set down her knife and looked at him. "And if it doesn't work? If we go through the surgery and the hoping and the trying and it still doesn't result in a baby, then we look at other options," Philip said. "Adoption, fostering, becoming mentors to young people who need guidance. There are so many ways to nurture and give back that don't require biological children." He took her hands in his. "But Elena, I need you to know something. Whatever we decide, it has to be what you truly want, not what you think I want or what you think will make me happy. What do you want?" Elena thought about the question, really thought about it. "I want a family," she said slowly. But I'm realizing that family can mean a lot of things. It doesn't have to mean a biological child. It could mean adoption. It could mean pouring ourselves into the community arts center and the young people there. It could mean being the aunt and uncle who are always there for our nieces and nephews. She squeezed his hands. What I don't want is to spend the next few years chasing something that might not happen and missing the life we could be building together right now. Philip nodded, understanding dawning. So we take it one step at a time. One step at a time, Elena agreed. Maybe we look into reversal. Maybe we don't. Maybe we explore adoption down the road. But we do it together, with open communication, and we don't let it consume us. I can do that, Philip said, relief evident in his voice. We can do that. As months turned into a year, Elena and Philip discovered something unexpected. Their marriage, rebuilt from rubble, was actually stronger than it had been before. Because now it was built on truth instead of illusion, on vulnerability instead of performance, on genuine intimacy instead of careful avoidance. They found joy in simple things. Elena baking chocolate chip cookies, while Philip tried to steal bites of dough. Philip reading the newspaper on Sunday mornings, while Elena sketched ideas for new art programs. Quiet evenings on the couch, where they could just exist together without needing to fill the silence. One evening, Elena was working on her laptop when she felt Philip come up behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist and kissed the back of her neck, a gesture that had once been routine but had been absent for so long. "What are you working on?" he asked. "Proposal for a youth mentorship program at the center," she said, relaxing into his embrace. "I want to create opportunities for teenagers who are interested in creative careers but don't have the resources or connections." Philip rested his chin on her shoulder, reading over her work. "This is incredible, Elena. How can I help?" And just like that, they were partners again. Not perfect, not without scars, but together. Nearly a year after that devastating night with the divorce papers, Elena and Philip stood on their balcony overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched out before them, glittering and infinite, the same view they'd had on their wedding night and every night since. But everything felt different now. Elena leaned against the railing, and Philip wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against the evening breeze. "We came so close to losing everything," Elena said softly, echoing a sentiment they'd both had 1,000 times. Philip pressed a kiss to her hair. "I think about that night constantly. The night you put those papers down, the night I finally told you the truth. I still have nightmares that I didn't, that I let you walk away. But you didn't," Elena said, turning to look up at him. "You found the courage to be honest. Finally." She smiled slightly, even if it was about 7 years too late. Philip laughed softly, a sound that still held notes of sadness. 7 years, 2 months, and 11 days too late. But who's counting? Elena reached up and touched his face gently. "I am. I'm counting every moment of pain and every moment of healing. I'm counting the lies and the truths. I'm counting all of it, because that's what got us here." "And where is here?" Philip asked, his eyes searching hers. Elena thought about the question, about the months of therapy and tears and difficult conversations, about the slow rebuilding of trust and the gradual return of intimacy, about learning to communicate openly instead of hiding in silence. "Here is stronger than before," she said finally. "Here is honest. Here is messy and imperfect but real. Here is 2 people who've been through fire and decided they'd rather face it together than walk away." Philip's eyes filled with tears. "I love you," he said. "I've loved you from the moment I spilled coffee on you at that carnival, but I love you even more now, because now I know what it means to almost lose you, to have to fight for you, to have to earn you every single day." Elena felt her own tears coming. "I love you too, and that scared me for a while, that I could still love you after what you did. But I've learned that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing to stay when things get hard, choosing honesty over comfort, choosing to rebuild instead of walking away." Philip tilted her chin up and kissed her, not the passionate kisses of their early days, but something deeper, something that spoke of weathered storms and hard-won peace, something that tasted like forgiveness and hope and the promise of better days ahead. They pulled apart and stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, the city humming its eternal song below them. "What have we learned from all this?" Elena asked thoughtfully. "What's the lesson we're taking forward?" Philip considered the question seriously. "I've learned that love means nothing without truth," he said. "That trying to protect someone by lying to them is just selfishness in disguise. That vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the only path to genuine intimacy." He looked at her. "And I've learned that I married someone far stronger and more forgiving than I ever deserved." Elena nodded. "And I've learned that I have to speak up for myself. That silence can be just as destructive as lies. That if something is wrong, I have to address it instead of hoping it will magically get better on its own." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing to move forward without letting the past poison the present. We've both learned that trust is fragile," Philip added, "that it takes years to build and seconds to destroy, but that if both people are willing to do the work, it can be rebuilt, maybe even stronger than before." Elena smiled against his shoulder. "Look at us, being all wise and introspective. We paid a high price for this wisdom," Philip said, but there was a lightness in his tone that had been absent for so long. "We might as well use it." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and the evening air, both thinking about the journey they'd been on and the road that still stretched ahead. Because healing isn't linear. There would be setbacks and difficult days and moments of doubt. But they would face those moments together now, with honesty and openness, and a commitment to communication that hadn't existed before. "So what now?" Elena asked eventually. "Where do we go from here?" Philip thought about it. "We keep doing what we're doing. Therapy, honesty, building our life together one day at a time. We figure out the children's questions when we're ready, without pressure or timelines. We support each other's dreams. We show up for each other, especially when it's hard." Elena nodded. "And we never, ever let fear keep us from telling each other the truth, no matter how scary that truth might be." "No matter how scary," Philip agreed. They stood in silence for another moment. Then Elena said something that surprised even herself. "I'm glad this happened." Philip looked at her in shock. "You're glad?" "Not glad that you lied," Elena clarified quickly. "Not glad that I spent years blaming myself or that we hurt each other so deeply, but glad that we were forced to rebuild. Because the marriage we have now, built on truth and vulnerability and genuine communication, is so much stronger than what we had before. Before, we were performing for each other. Now we're actually with each other. Does that make sense?" Philip pulled her closer. "It makes perfect sense. And you're right. As much as I regret my choices and the pain they caused, I can't regret where we ended up. Because this," he gestured between them, "this is real in a way it never was before." Elena turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. "So here's what I want you to know, Philip. I forgive you. Not completely, I'm still working on that. But I'm getting there. And I want you to forgive yourself too. Because holding on to that guilt forever won't serve either of us. You made a terrible mistake. You owned it. You did the work to fix it. And now it's time to let both of us move forward without that weight." Philip felt something release in his chest, something he'd been holding for so long it had become part of him. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a second chance I didn't deserve." "You did deserve it," Elena corrected gently, "because you were willing to tell the truth no matter the cost, because you were willing to do the work, because you showed me that people can change if they're motivated by love instead of fear." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky above Manhattan, Elena and Philip stood together on their balcony. Two people who had journeyed through the darkest valley of their relationship and emerged on the other side. Not unscathed, not unchanged, but together. They had learned that love without truth is just a beautiful lie. That secrets, no matter how well-intentioned, are slow poison. That trust, once broken, requires years of consistency to rebuild. They had learned that forgiveness is not a single moment, but a daily choice. That communication is the foundation of everything. That vulnerability, terrifying as it is the only path to genuine intimacy. Most importantly, they had learned that a relationship doesn't have to be perfect to be worth fighting for. That scars can be proof of survival rather than signs of failure. That sometimes the strongest love is the one that's been tested by fire and chosen to endure. Their story wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more conversations to have, more healing to do. The question of children remained open, full of possibilities they would explore together. The future was uncertain, as it always had been. But now they were facing it together, with honest eyes and open hearts. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all, that the goal isn't perfection, but presence. Not a flawless love, but an honest one. Not a marriage without pain, but one strong enough to survive it. As they stood on that balcony, the city lights reflecting in their eyes, Elena and Philip knew they had something precious, something hard-won, something built not on the sandy foundation of lies and omission, but on the solid bedrock of truth. They had each other, they had honesty, they had hope, and sometimes that's all you need to build something beautiful. Now I want to hear from you, because this story isn't just about Philip and Elena. It's about the choices we all make in our relationships every single day. So here's my question. Have you ever kept a secret from someone you loved because you were afraid of how they'd react? Maybe it was something big, like Philip's vasectomy, or maybe it was something smaller, a fear, a doubt, a past mistake. And if you did keep that secret, what happened? Did you eventually tell the truth, or is it still sitting there between you, invisible but heavy? Drop your story in the comments below. Be honest. Be vulnerable. Because the truth is, we've all been either Philip or Elena at some point in our lives, either the person keeping secrets or the person being kept in the dark. And maybe by sharing our stories, we can help each other find the courage to be honest, to speak difficult truths, to choose vulnerability over self-protection. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own relationships or the importance of honesty in love, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Because every week I bring you real stories about real people facing real challenges. Stories that might just help you navigate your own life with a little more wisdom and a lot more courage. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's struggling with whether to tell the truth or keep the peace. Someone who's been hurt by secrets or who's carrying secrets of their own. Because the most powerful thing we can do is remind each other that we're not alone in our struggles. That honesty is hard, but worth it. That love, real love, can survive the truth. So tell me, what secret have you been carrying? And are you ready to put it down? I'll be reading every single comment, and I promise there's no judgment here. Just a community of people trying to do better, love harder, and live more honestly. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.